It had been a day with nothing much to do. Katie found out that dust bunnies collect in hard-to-reach places. Orbie learned that Chance only wants to play her games and not dress up. And they both discovered that some days it's hard to think of something new and different to do. Katie and Orbie sat on their front steps. It seemed like all their friends were out of town or busy. Nobody was around to play with them. Orbie felt a whole lot like playing t-ball, but two people were just not enough. Katie wanted to do some grass dancing, but they needed 3 dancers, so they sat unhappy and bored on the steps. Mom brought out some grape juice with funny ice cubes in it. Katie and Orbie giggled and drank the juice, thanking Mom with big smiles. Mom suggested that they let some completely new ideas for fun come into their heads. Well, after she went into the house, that's exactly what they did. They decided that any kind of fun that could happen on that day would be okay with them. As they high-fived on it, a car drove into the driveway. The 2 purple mustached friends stood up to see who it was. Katie opened the front door and told Mom somebody had arrived. Mom came out and stood with him, and then with a shriek of joy, as she raced to the car, it was Shannon's mom. Hooray! And she wrapped her arms around her in a big hug. Katie and Orbie raced over to give hugs, too. And when Katie looked in the car for Shannon, there was nothing there but a big wicker trunk in the back seat. Katie and Orbie peeked in through the door. Then there was a loud click of a seatbelt. And Shannon jumped up. As you can imagine, Katie and Orbie cheered. Shannon was exactly what their day needed. Well, there was shouting and running and hugging going around in all directions. It was quite an event. The 2 moms headed into the house. Orbie went to close the car door for Shannon, but she stopped him. The great big wicker trunk had to come, too. Orbie stepped into the car. He wanted to be like Dad, so he gave the trunk a good yank. But the trunk stayed right where it was. Orbie flipped over to the other side and pushed it as hard as he could, but the trunk still sat there. He asked Katie and Shannon to help him. They yanked on it as he pushed on it, and slowly, the really heavy wicker trunk inched across the seat to the edge. Orbie told the girls to stand back so he could show them how strong he was. He flipped up over the trunk again, and from outside the car, he pulled the trunk, thump, 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 down onto the ground. Katie was afraid that something might have broken, but Shannon said that there was nothing inside that could break. The 3 friends tried to tug or lug it up the driveway, but it was a heavy trunk, and it wouldn't budge. Katie was going to run in and get Mom, but Shannon grabbed her arm. She had a better idea. Maybe they could take a few things out and make it lighter. Orbie looked at Shannon. She was so smart. Shannon opened up the trunk, and there, inside, were piles of beautiful costumes. Her grandmother traveled the world and sent home costumes for every country she visited. There were sparkly ones and shiny ones, and costumes with great headdresses and bright colors. Even just lying there in the trunk, they were absolutely beautiful. Shannon looked at Orbie and decided that he would be a good Arabian prince. Orbie liked the sound of that. Shannon pulled out a turban with a great big decoration on the front. She plunked it on his head, and she pulled out a pair of white poofy pants and a jewel belt with a shoulder strap. When he was all dressed up, Orbie looked amazing. The jewels sparkled in the sunlight. Katie couldn't wait to see what Shannon had for her in the wicker trunk. She rummaged through the trunk and pulled out a sari from India. It was the most beautiful color. Katie couldn't even begin to imagine how you wore it. But Shannon lifted Katie's arms and turned her around. Soon Katie was wrapped up in the sari, and the gold brocade gleamed in the sun. Shannon then took out what looked like a big jewel and pulled a strip of paper off the back of it. The back was sticky. Shannon stuck it onto Katie's forehead. It was a bindi and looked beautiful on Katie. Shannon looked at the costumes for a moment and then pulled out a Spanish lady's outfit. It had a huge hair comb that was supposed to stick up high. There was a long, beautiful dress with laces and ribbons and a fan. Shannon told Katie and Orbie the weather was hot in Spain, so in the olden days, ladies used to carry fans. When Shannon flipped open the fan, it made an impressive noise. There were little holes in it that made it very pretty. Shannon hiked up her long dress and grabbed the trunk. Katie hiked up her sari and grabbed it too. Orbie lifted from behind. Now that they had taken things out of it, it was light enough to carry inside. The three costume friends and the wicker trunk crossed the lawn and went into the house. Mom was very surprised to see three such extraordinary people. Shannon's mom smiled. The friends told them they'd be back with a surprise. In Katie's room, they made up a story for a play. They practiced it twice. It was the story of an East Indian woman who knew the secret to opening a magic chest full of coins and treasures. An Arabian prince tried to open it, and he couldn't. So he got help from the woman. The magic spell had to be spoken in Spanish. Unfortunately, the Spanish lady kept getting mixed up, and the spell kept doing the wrong thing. Orbie was very funny every time Shannon did the spell wrong. Then finally, Orbie the prince, achoo, sneezed, and the trunk opened wide. The two moms laughed and clapped their hands. They loved the play. When it was over, Shannon asked her friends if they wanted to do another. And in a flash, they were back up in Katie's room going through Shannon's magnificent costume trunk. That day, Katie never did grass dance, and Orbie never played t-ball. But they had a whole lot of fun with Shannon's costumes. And I just happen to know that if you had been there, you'd have had a wonderful time too.
Did you know? All sorts of creatures live together in different kinds of groups. A whole bunch of geese are called a gaggle. Fish travel in schools. Prairie dogs live in towns. And a family of whales is called a pod. But I think your family is the very best of all.